Hello and welcome back to the Injury Prone Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Edwin Porras, Dr. Physical Therapy Medical Analyst, FantasyPoints.com. Today we're going to talk about all the teams that are on bye. In addition to that, we're going to talk about Justin Herbert and his injury, what that means. Kenny Pickett, Mike Evans. We'll get into Matthew Stafford, what his injury is. Is he going to get Cooper Kupp back? I'll talk a little bit about that. Get Mike Evans and his hamstring strength, Pat Freiermuth, T. Higgins. All of those guys, we're going to touch on every single one of them as quickly as possible. And then, like I mentioned, we'll talk about a couple guys coming off of, or presumably coming off of, the PUP. So let's get started. Number one, understand the Cleveland Browns bye week, the Chargers bye week, the Bucks bye week, the Seahawks bye week. All of those teams have bye weeks in week 5, so you have to understand how to fill them. Don't spend too much fab going out there and spending a ton of fab for guys that you know are only going to start for you in the bye week. Unless you have fab to spend, then go for it. But understand that if this isn't a must-win week for you, if you're sitting at 4-0, 3-1, then it really shouldn't be something that you spend too much time thinking about. This is one of the, I think, most overrated weeks of the season, unless you have a ton of different bye weeks spread out. But even then, don't spend too much money for your bye weeks. We'll jump right into Justin Herbert. So Ian Rappaport confirmed that Justin Herbert has essentially a fingernail and a finger fracture, a fingernail issue and a finger fracture. That doesn't sound really bad on the surface, but those injuries can be extremely painful. You do not want to have these injuries as a quarterback. It is to his left hand, his non-throwing hand, and they are going into their bye week. For fantasy purposes, I can't say this is going to impact him too much, but it is a consideration. It could be an issue with exchanges. It could be an issue handing the ball off, stuff like that. Really just keep an eye on it. But like I said, they're going into their bye week. After their bye week, they should get Austin Eckler back, and that team should be close to full strength. Obviously now without Mike Williams, but Justin Herbert, his finger to his non-throwing hand, shouldn't impact fantasy too much. Kenny Pickett. So you saw Kenny Pickett go down on video. It looked like it could have been an MCL issue. You do have some reports saying it's MCL, and Ian Rappaport came out and said, I believe it was Ian Rappaport, said that this is a bone bruise. So bone bruises are extremely painful. Again, another injury that doesn't sound really bad. Kenny Pickett going down with this bone bruise. Now, what the report also said is that they don't expect him to miss a ton of time, which is great. So you have MCL examples, right? Quarterbacks who had an MCL issue. Here are some examples and how many games they missed. Russell Wilson, 0 games. Drew Brees, 0 games. Ryan Fitzpatrick, 1 game. Jacoby Brissett, 1 game. Those are quarterbacks who had an MCL issue. So then you look at the most recent example who had a bone bruise, a quarterback who had a bone bruise, Andy Dalton in 2021. He missed 2 games. So at worst, this is probably going to be a 2-week absence for Kenny Pickett. But remember that the Steelers have a bye week in week 6. So they very easily could sit Pickett for week 5. And then obviously they get that bye week. So plan to be without Kenny Pickett, but understand this isn't going to be a long-term issue for him. Another quarterback here, Matthew Stafford, hip pointer, essentially like a contusion. He landed on it. There is some issue with pain tolerance. There's an issue with essentially like re-injury or re-aggravation, but Stafford has probably played through worse. I mean, I know he's played through worse in his career. He's had a lot of injury issues, so this probably will limit his mobility a little bit, but for fantasy purposes, it shouldn't be that big of an issue. You can still throw him out there in 2 quarterback leagues. Moving on to pass catchers here. You have Mike Evans, who had a hamstring strain. Obviously, not an ideal situation. But in terms of this hamstring strain, their bye week could not have come at a better time. Mike Evans is 30 years old. He's had recurrences of these hamstring issues dating back to 2019. And we know that age is an issue in hamstring strain recurrences. The older you are, the more likely you are to have a recurrence, or the more severe the injury tends to be. We saw that with Cooper Kupp, who's also 30 years old. Since 2018, 65% of wide receivers who've had a hamstring strain and are 28 years or older also had a recurrence. So this Bucks bye week could not have come at a better time. I don't necessarily expect this to be a long-term issue per se, but I don't not expect it to be a long-term issue, if that makes sense. Mike Evans is putting up numbers. He's been productive, relatively productive, but man, I don't want this headache. My transaction recommendation here, I want to trade away Mike Evans. Get something comparable. Don't trade him for pennies, but at the same time, I just don't want to deal with this. Now that he's got the hamstring issue again, this could crop up basically at any given point. So I'm trying to trade away Mike Evans and avoid that re-injury rate. T. Higgins, ribs fractures, and rib fractures suck because there's nothing you can do about them. You essentially have to wait for time and biology to do its thing, and you sometimes can't even breathe. It hurts to breathe with these. So when players play through these, it's always a super interesting thing to see, the pain tolerance and stuff like that. So this is a really injury that has a really wide array of outcomes. Like this could be, a 2021 AJ Brown situation where he sits out for 4 weeks. He actually got placed on the IR for that ribs issue, or he can miss no time. So again, just like I did with the quarterbacks, I'll give you wide receivers who had rib fractures, and they missed either 0 or 1 games in the recent past. Alshon Jeffrey, Zay Jones, Julian Edelman, Emmanuel Sanders, Allen Robinson, Kenny Golladay, Danny Amendola, DJ Chark. All those guys missed 0 or 1 games. But like I said, AJ Brown missed in 2021 and missed 4 games, 2021. So I know that I'm not giving you a ton here, but honestly, my recommendation transaction, I'm getting rid of Bengals, whether it's Joe Mixon, whether it's Joe Burrow, whether it's T. Higgins. Maybe I hold on to Jamar Chase, especially if I won 1 game or I've won 2 games. I mean, you need production now. Should this offense be buzzing in week 7, 8, 9, 10? Sure. I mean, will T. Higgins be healthy in week 7, 8, 9, 10? Sure. Will Joe Burrow be healthy in 7, 8, 9, 10? Yeah, we hope so. Maybe that's really when the offense hits their stride, but especially if you won 1 game or 0 games, I'm just trying to, again, similar to Mike Evans, offload these Bengals, get production that you can get in return, because even if T. Higgins plays in the next week or 2, there's no telling how he's going to do. There's no telling whether he'll be just a decoy. We saw Deebo Samuel play through a ribs injury and obviously wasn't as big of a part of the game plan. So, again, T. Higgins with the rib fractures, this could go a lot of different directions. I would just be offloading my Bengals. Another pass catcher here, a tight end, Pat Freiermuth. I think it's Jerry Dulac is calling this, quote, more than a tweak. He's getting imaging, presumably got imaging Pat Freiermuth did yesterday. He's a big boy, but he's young. So even though they're calling this just a tweak, I would imagine that this could extend, beyond the bye week if it's severe as they're making it sound. His young age does help him. But again, I thought that with Deontay Johnson, and the Steelers said, nope, shutting him down, putting him on IR. So given their conservative nature, given the fact they're calling this more than a tweak, I wouldn't anticipate being without Pat Freiermuth for at least the next 2 weeks through the bye, and we'll see what they do. We'll see what the Steelers do with Freiermuth in terms of roster moves, but hold your breath. Hope that they don't put him on IR. And at this point, hopefully somebody like Luke Musgrave is on your waiver wire still. Hopefully you can get somebody like a Gerald Everett somehow, some way, maybe make a trade. But I would plan to be without the big dude for at least the next 2 weeks. Mentioning another tight end, Luke Musgrave in the concussion protocol, really not a ton to add there. He did get injured in the Thursday night game, so I do think that based on the timeline and the averages that he should be able to clear concussion protocol. But again, continue to check in here. Continue to check in on the Patreon, patreon.com/injuryprone. Another tight end before I move on to one more receiver and running back. Donald Parham Jr. is kind of going out of order here. Sorry. It did look like he landed and potentially could have fractured his wrist. I haven't seen any updates this morning, so continue to check in on that because he might lead to more targets and routes run for Gerald Everett, especially in the red zone. Devontae Adams, long story short, landed on his shoulder, looked like an AC injury, probably was an AC injury. He came back, he played through. It's not a lock that he's going to play in week 5, but I mean, he was out there. So again, he is more volatile. Re-injury rate is a concern with Devontae Adams, but I'm not going to tell you to bench him. I'm not going to tell you to give him away. Jimmy Garoppolo should be back next week, so just keep an eye on Devontae Adams' practice status. The other thing is Javonte Williams has a hip flexor strain. On average, you see guys miss between 1 and 3 weeks, really 1 and 2 weeks, depending on the severity. Or it could extend out to something like what Jeff Wilson Jr. had. But again, Javonte Williams hip flexor strain, that's essentially a groin strain. The median return time frame is 18 days. And the average, like I said, is somewhere in that 7 to 21 day window. So there's a chance that we don't see Javonte Williams next week. Adam Schefter reports that this might not cost Williams any time at all. Again, we've seen Schefter miss recently in the last year or so. So this is something to definitely keep an eye on. Williams is at high risk to sit as of today. I mean, you're probably going to get some, Jaleel McLaughlin chatter, but in reality, you should probably already have Samaje Perine. Excuse me. Jaleel McLaughlin is really going to be just a filler guy, like a deeper league guy. If you read the Injury Prone Fantasy Draft Guide and Playbook, you should already have a decent amount of Samaje Perine because we did project this was a possibility for Javonte Williams getting his workloads ramped up too quickly. This could be something that had to do with how fast the Broncos threw him out there. We'll never really know, but at least we were prepared for it. That is everything. Again, Cooper Kupp. Jay Glazer did subtly drop Cooper Kupp would be back in week 5. That is a possibility. Could he re-injure? Yes. Is he 30 years old? Yes. Is there high risk there? Yes. But if you waited this long, you just have to hold on for dear life. Maybe he has a big game and you trade him for another top 10 guy, but I mean, that's probably not going to happen. So just be prepared for a re-injury. Insulate yourself as best you can. Maybe you are just a waiver wire machine and you have Puka Nacua and you have guys like Nico Collins, you have guys like Tank Dell, and you can survive another Cooper Kupp re-injury. But just be prepared for that. Jonathan Taylor, again, coming off PUP. His window was activated. We presume he'll be active in week 5. You got to throw him out there. This probably tanks any of your Zach Moss stonks. So hold on to Zach Moss for now. That ankle issue with Jonathan Taylor, really, was it an ankle issue? Was it a contract issue? We're not really certain, to be 100% honest with you. So we'll just have to watch him in practice. If we get any videos there, tag me at FBInjuryDoc. If we get it, we'll watch him play in week 5 if he's there. And if he's active, you have to start him. You waited this long, similar to Cooper Kupp, so throw him out there. Again, make sure you're joining the Patreon, where we talk about this stuff all week. You get updates on Sunday morning, updates on Saturday evening, Wednesday afternoon. You get updates and you get to ask questions basically at all hours of the night, all hours of the day. I will answer them as soon as I possibly can. It's been a fun group there. It's been really chill. It's been a good discussion point. It's been a good landing spot for a lot of my additional content that you don't get on the podcast and the YouTube. So make sure you're going to patreon.com/injuryprone and you can sign up there. Hit me up for a free month. Just text me and say, hey, I want a free month. Or maybe not text me because you don't have my phone number, but you can DM me and ask for a free month if you really want one. That'll be everything. Again, to summarize, Justin Herbert, Kenny Pickett, shouldn't be long-term issues. Matthew Stafford, not a long-term issue. Mike Evans, I would trade away, even for his teammate, somebody like Chris Godwin. T. Higgins, I would trade away for somebody of similar value, for maybe to a Bengals fan or something, even though this could extend out for 4 weeks for T. Higgins for sure, or it could be just 1 week. We don't really know. It's a really volatile situation. Javonte Williams, volatile situation at a high risk to sit. Jaleel McLaughlin, if you want to throw a couple bucks at him, go for it on the waiver wire, but I wouldn't spend too much. You should already have Samaje Perine. Devontae Adams, just watch his practice status. Pat Freiermuth, plan to be without him for a while, and Luke Musgrave could come back in week 5. That'll do it. Again, follow me on Twitter at FBInjuryDoc. Make sure you are subscribing to the Patreon, patreon.com/injuryprone.